What's up, everyone, and welcome into the Buffalo Sports Collective. It is Monday, January 13th, 2025. As always, I am PK alongside my co-host Phil. Episode 325. Don't really have much introduction here, Phil. We got a jam-packed show, so we're just going to dive right into it. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on X and Blue Sky at Buffalo Sports Co. Don't forget to follow our channel wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out our website at buffalosportscollective.com. Phil's breakdown of the game we're about to talk about, plus more in-depth details that he breaks down all the time, will be out on Thursday. My power rankings will be back out on Thursday. Pay attention to those at, once again, buffalosportscollective.com. You can also check out our store on our link tree on all our social media sites or at the top of the website by simply hitting the shop tab. You can represent the BSC on the go and look for the time breakdowns in the description of the show. First one, Buffalo Bandits. Phil, I don't know if they play the Toronto Rock or a tiny little pebble, but either way, Buffalo's domination of Toronto continues. A 15-13 win. It was definitely not as easy as my introduction made it sound. We definitely said on the Thursday preview show. Forgot we recorded and put that out on Thursday because it was Friday game. Been a eventful weekend, but we said that you cannot take this team lightly. That they're a team that's desperate. You use those exact words, and I think it was perfectly summed up in this game. This was a team that needed to win. Their playoffs are on the line. They're pretty much their playoffs are the rest of the season, and it showed in this one. They got out to a hot start. By half they had scored more goals than Buffalo has allowed all game long, 8. And then by the end of it, Buffalo needed to have a really strong fourth quarter to take out the win this Toronto Rock, but again, like we say all the time, they don't ask how, they ask how many. And if 15-13 win, McKay had 5, Byrne had 3, Smith and Buchanan had 2, Nanticoke, Frazier, and Weiss each had 1. Vince, 24 of 37 saves, shots 57-37 in favor of Buffalo. Face-offs, 22-9 in favor of Buffalo. Power play, 2 for 5 for Buffalo, 3 for 7 for Toronto. Phil, where do we want to start with this one? It's a jam-packed game that just had literally everything involved. I was seeing many people tweet out or post and whatever. If you're trying to get people that aren't lacrosse fans involved and interested in an NLL game, this would be the game to show them because it had a little bit of everything, including excitement right up until the final buzzer.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was a nationally broadcast game in Canada, being on TSN. Sorry. So I think it is a great look for them and for a game for them to get. This is about as good as it gets. I mean, between these two teams, a lot of bad blood. You knew, despite Toronto's bad 0-4 record, they're really not an 0-4 team. They're a better team than that. They've lost a lot of close battles, and we knew this was going to be a very close, very rough game. And everything we said not to do is exactly what the Bandits ended up doing, which is why it stayed so close for as long as it did. We said don't let Toronto get too many goals early in the first quarter. They came out with a 5 spot, I believe.
Yep, 5-5 after 1. Yep.
We said don't let them bait you into a lot of penalties. It's going to be a high-intensity game. They got baited into a lot of penalties. And it was just pretty much everything we said don't do to keep Toronto Rock out of this game, they ended up doing, and it was a much closer game. But it was a really great game. And toward the second half, even in the third quarter, and then as the fourth quarter was winding down, I just kept thinking to myself, do whatever you need to do to get out of this game and escape with a win. Like you said toward the end, they don't ask how, they ask how many. This game was just my goodness, find a way to win and get the heck out of here with the reviews they had, with the calls that were being made, with the wild back and forth game the entire time. It was a game you didn't want to lose, but it was a game that if you won, you can you don't want to forget it. There's a lot that needs to go into this that the Bandits need to work on, but it was a game that you just absolutely wanted to win and then just get out of it. Just run away from that game. It was just very intense, very back and forth, fantastic game. I don't know. You want to start? I guess we'll just keep it simple and start with the offense. Go
Yeah.
there.
I mean, it's
There's a lot to
Friday,
talk
you
about.
were clearly up in the box. So what we learned last year was that when you're up in the box, there's a different type of viewing experience, not just from where you're viewing it, like an actual physical difference in viewing it, but also when you're up there, you're taking out all the bias. You're up there as a media member. You're not up there as a fan. Well, I had that experience a little bit easier than you did last year. You're coming around to it, but it was so different than what it was for me, at least. Like when I'm in the stands, I'm seeing certain things. Like I try to remain as unbiased as I can when I'm in the stands. Like if there's a call and everybody's booing, like it's loved and everybody knows what's going on there. I'm the one that's just sitting there like, yeah, that was the right call and blah blah blah. But I was still catching myself, and we can get into it as the show continues. There was times where I was texting you and just going like, hey, I'm trying not to be biased here, but like this seems like this sort of game, and you were like, yeah, it's not ideal. So we can dive into that stuff in a little bit, but yeah, I mean, 10 ties, 10 lead changes, and where I was going with that was after the game, I watched this again Sunday morning just for all my notes, and whenever they play a home game and I'm in the stands or if I'm up in the box, I always rewatch it because you can pause it, you can take your notes, you can rewind it, and so on and so forth. So I always rewatch those type of games. The away games, you can pause it live and catch back up. So but home games definitely a rewatch. This one I definitely came away pretty much the same thought that I did in the stands, but this one was so close. Like I had to pause the TV so many times to write down the notes, and my notes are just jam packed. But 10 ties, 10 lead changes, 5-5 after one. Toronto led 8-7 at half. They led 10-9 after three. They actually held a 1-goal lead, 13-12. With 1:13 left until Frazier got inside and scored. Then a big save by Vince and a great snag for the loose ball by Priolo feeds it up to Weiss in transition. Smith ends it with an empty netter. But yeah, we can start with the offense. I think the offense, it could have, there could have been more goals scored by this offense. Howelchuk, when he came in, it seemed like he settled everything down. He was making big time saves in the fourth quarter. But early on, I thought Rose played very, very well. I think up until, he still gave up 5 in the first quarter, but early on, the first 5 minutes, I thought he was playing very well in net. Buffalo was getting those opportunities. They just weren't able to capitalize. But for me, the biggest standout for the offense, besides the 15 goals, and I'm not trying to be all high and mighty by 15 goals, we're kind of used to it, but we're used to it at this point in this season. The biggest thing that stood out to me was the back checking on offense. I counted 9 times the back checking that they did, or the hustle that the offense was staying out on the field, pulling what we're typically seeing Kyle Buchanan do, always the last one to leave the field. It was everybody. It was McKay, Smith, Scanley got involved, Byrne was involved, but I counted 9 times either they caused the turnover they got credited for, or just made Toronto had the 8-second call, or just throw it down the field and cause a turnover there. But it seemed like, to me, the biggest thing that stood out that's different than the first 3 games, not just because it was close, was the back checking by the forwards. It was something to watch, and it caused so much havoc out there for those forwards. The extra possessions and the extra turnovers they were able to cause. It was a sight to see.
Yeah, I wrote in my notes kind of like a half-court press in basketball seemed to be what they were doing, where a lot of times they'll let the guys just kind of run by and, just everybody will switch off. The offense won't stay on. They'll get the defense on and kind of settle things in. It seemed like there was a lot of pressure right around half field to either have the offense catch up from behind, or somebody charging up to really press at half to try to get those kind of turnovers. Toronto's known for being a very big transition team, so I don't know if that was put in the game plan to attempt to kind of slow that down, knowing that either somebody's behind you, or even just really having the defense, instead of, dropping back in, settling up, getting their position, just really stepping up and trying to force those half-field turnovers. And it seemed to work pretty well. I mean, the Toronto didn't really have too much transition going for them all game. Desnu got that late one, and then Martin had that one, but it really wasn't transition. It was off the face-off, and Buchanan was draped all over him. Just a good individual effort. But I think overall they did do a good job of the forecheck, the back check, whatever you want to call it, both ways, both sides. And a lot of those turnovers ended up creating opportunities and goals for the Bandits. So that was huge, especially Byrne and Buchanan and Smith, like you said. I mean, the big guys who are known for it, but like you said, then also the other player, even Scanlon had a lot of those types of plays. I think Scanlon's doing a good job kind of turning into the left side Buchanan, where he's just around the ball a lot, trying to get those loose balls, trying to cause turnovers, trying to get in the defense's face. So even if they do get the ball out, they take those extra few seconds because every second matters, especially with a shot clock and allowing your defense to get on the floor. So I think Scanlon, while he didn't have a ton of numbers for this game, I think he did do a really good job with the loose balls, and the loose balls number was wildly in the Bandits' favor, and I don't have it there.
Yeah, they were up by like 13 or something at half alone.
Yeah, it was 89 to 62 in favor of the Bandits for loose balls. And normally you and I don't care about loose balls, but plus 30 is pretty ridiculous.
And that reflects on the shooting too. Is
correct.
Buffalo had 20 more shots on net than Toronto did. Toronto only had 13 shots. Based on the numbers that they had in the broadcast, they had Toronto with 24 shots. Or sorry, let me double check. They had 21 shots at halftime. So 16 shots in the second half. They did a phenomenal job, and that was one of the resolutions on our resolution show where I said, hey, limit the shots that Vince is facing. I know all the shots that he's facing are the ones that he wants, but we got to limit the opportunities and the shots that Vince has to make, and they definitely did in this one. We'll talk about it in a second, but this was not a game where I thought the defense and Vince shined very much. It definitely showed that Toronto was definitely the more aggressive team, but Buffalo's offense really came out to play. I mean, the extra opportunities on offense, like you mentioned with the loose balls, the drawing of the penalties, the 5-minute major that Buchanan was able to draw, that was unbelievable. And that was the one thing that I mentioned. And I regret not saying it out loud in the moment in the stands, but I noticed that I'm not saying that Jubenville targeted Bucky's head whatsoever. I'm not accusing him of that whatsoever. I saw the interaction they had in the line, so it was very clear that he was not intentionally trying to hit him in the head. But I did notice that Jubenville's really like keying in on Buchanan on this shift, and it ended up being the same shift that Jubenville got him in the head. But, Smith draws the call for the cross-check into the head. That draws a penalty. He draws another one, but ends up scoring on that one. So while the power play was 2 for 5, it was really 3 for 6 if you want to go that route, but I know they don't really call it. But really, there wasn't a ton of negatives that I saw for the forward group. There was a ton of positives. Nanakoke was really involved. You saw the 8 turnovers that he had on the box score, but I think a lot of it came from the second opportunities or on the penalty kill where he was drawing the time, where he had 3 guys draped on him and Byrne was streaking to the net on the opposite side and he almost fed him. That ends up being a turnover. But yeah, to speak to Scanlon, and I guess I'll ask you this question real quick and we can give a really quick reply on it. What are your thoughts on, again, it's only 2 games he's played, but you said it perfectly and that's exactly how I would have described him. He seems like the lefty forward Buchanan with less numbers to back it up. Actually, I think he's played in 3 games at this point. What are your thoughts on what they're going to do with him when Kluch comes back? I personally think their end result is they're going to probably put him down to the practice squad once again. But I think the element that he adds to this offense is so niche and so important to that lefty forwards, and we've been on the record saying that you really need a bruiser or lane setter or something on the lefty forwards besides the McKay, the Kluch, and the Byrne to do something. I think Scanlon adds that, but with the number crunch, I just don't know if there's a spot for him when they're fully healthy.
Yeah, I think it comes down to injuries more than anything, and not even Cloutier. It's more of like the situation I could see him getting in is if there's a defensive injury, they have the confidence? And it's very difficult right now with McKay putting up 5 spots like it's nobody's business. Dropping McKay to the defense transition role and then having Scanlon as your additional forward on the lefty side to keep him in the game, and then you don't have a bonus defender. McKay becomes your bonus defender in replacement of a defensive player who's injured. Do they make that switch to have Scanlon now be that extra lefty forward and McKay drops back? Like, I think that's the question of, has Scanlon earned that right? Because I think that would be the tough kind of positional call you'd have to make, because
they would definitely have to make it a roster adjustment, because when Kluch comes back, they're maxed out at the 21. Scanlon would have to go back, but you can fiddle with the roster of, sending somebody else.
Yeah, it'd be more if there's an injury in the future. I think Scanlon's played really well, but I think it's the same situation with anybody who comes into the Buffalo Bandits roster right now. There's a crunch, and it's near impossible to stay active. I think he's done enough to prove that he deserves to be on this roster, deserves to be on this team. And as a practice squad player, honestly, that's all you can do for the Bandits is do what you need to do to prove that you deserve to be here for the future. So when those injuries do come up, they have the confidence to put you right into the lineup and they're not skipping over you for somebody else. That's kind of where you don't want to be on a team like this. If you can prove that you deserve to be in the lineup, which he has, in my opinion, that when that injury comes up, they have no problem putting you back in. I think as a practice squad player, as a depth player on the Bandits, that's kind of where you want to be, unfortunately, because their starting roster, it's a championship roster. It is all the way through, and they really don't have too many weak spots. So it's really hard to kind of bump a starter out to be put in. I see what you're saying, but like once Cloutier is healthy, and this is nothing against Scanlon, he's got to go right back in the lineup. They're not going to bench Cloutier. McKay's been playing out of his mind. You're not sitting him anytime soon. And then there's Burns. So as great as he's been playing, and I think he deserves a spot on this team, there's just no room unless there's another injury in the future. But I do think the interesting injury is if there's a defensive injury, do they have the confidence to add him as a forward and McKay to defense? I think that's kind of the interesting area that maybe he's pushed his way onto the roster for that kind of change where you normally would just see defense for defense. They might have the confidence to move McKay back and Scanlon up in that situation. But other than that, it's kind of, sad for him because he deserves to be on the roster, but it's going to have to be an injury. But again, he's made the most of the opportunities he's had, and that's the best you can do on this team.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that's the end goal. If McKay wasn't lighting up the lamp like he is, I think it would be a tougher discussion, but everything you summed up, it's nice to have him in your back pocket and know that he's back there, that he's capable, that if you're going to put him in, you're not going to have to worry about what he's doing on the offensive end. And I guess that's one benefit of Klutch getting hurt this early is now you know what Scanlon's capable of out the front door. So, the rest of the forward, Nanticoke, 1 goal, 8 shots on net. You had McKay having a huge night, an emotional night for him. 5, 3, and 8, 13 shots, 9 loose balls, 3 caused turnovers. There's going to be a lot of caused turnovers in here, like we mentioned, the back checking. Byrne, 3, 4, and 7, 5 loose balls and a caused turnover. Scanlon, only 2 assists, but he was way more involved. 6 loose balls and a caused turnover. Bucky, 2, 2, and 4, 7 shots on net, 7 loose balls. Smith, 2, 8, and 10, 9 loose balls, caused turnover. Frazier, quiet, but he comes up with the game-tying goal, 1, 2, and 3, 5 loose balls, 5 shots on net. And right before it, at the 2-minute warning, I told Brooke, I was like, they have to get inside on Howlchuk. He's making too many big saves from the outside. You need to challenge him. I love that instantly he comes in, Byrne gets a close shot, but he makes a great save. Howlchuk was keeping them in the game the whole fourth quarter. I can't overstate how well he played. And they said it on the broadcast as well, that it's so different to go from shooting on a Nick Rose to a shooting on a Troy Holochuk because they're such a different type of goalie, and it definitely showed in that one. And that's why I was like, they got to get inside on him. And as soon as Frazier went right around that corner, I was like, okay, this is exactly what you need. And I was not expecting the dunk over his right shoulder, but a great chance by him and a great he capitalized it perfect. He did exactly what they needed to do, and it's Frazier once again versus Toronto scoring a monster goal in a critical time. He was one of those ones that led the charge last year on the big time comeback in the playoffs, and he puts he starts the nail in the coffin of the Toronto Rock season.
Yeah, I mean, Johnny was asked about that at the press conference. Frazier's been very quiet. He was very quiet in this game. Normally he's somebody making some noise out there, and I guess I think Johnny said he even talked to him and said, like, hey, you're a little quiet, like, everything okay? Keep out there, like, keep doing what you got to do. And it seemed like a few of the players were also trying to kind of pump him up, like, hey, keep your head in the game. We're going to need you. Like, you're going to have your moment to make it count. I think it was McKay in his interview was kind of saying, like, he was talking to him, like, I know you're quiet right now, but, you're going to get your chance. And he did. And when he had that opportunity, he buried it. And the Selly, the roll, one knee, hand to the helmet, fantastic Selly. He was ready for that. And then from there, the team just kind of took off and took it. I mean, the only negative, I think, for the offense, it was good to see Byrne get inside. I think it was his first inside goal, possibly of the whole year. I mean, we really just haven't seen a lot of air Byrne. Smith had that one with his 17,000 fakes and he buried it. That was kind of inside. And then Fraser had his, and Nanticoke always gets his. But the team seems to be like, I don't want to say 15 goals by any means was lucky, but some of those goals by McKay where he's just whipping it from really far out, like some of them were picked corners and glorious shots, but the one with like 0.5 seconds left, he's just whipping that on net and hoping for the best, and it turned out well. Even Byrne, again, incredible shot.
It went into Rose's like pads, and I have no idea what Rose was doing. Like, I'm a goaltender in soccer, and there's a big difference between that and in lacrosse or hockey. But isn't the number one rule, like, you don't back up towards the net when you don't know where the ball is? Because he literally backed up and put the ball in his own net with that shot. I couldn't understand what the heck he was doing, but I do agree. Some of those shots were, I don't want to say lucky, but they were ones that you typically do not see beat a goaltender unless they're perfectly placed shots, and they were. But, 54 shots in between 4 and 5, 22 shots in between 10 and 11, 44 shots in between 11 and 12, 1 minute and 6 seconds between 12 and 14, 30 seconds between goals 13 and 14, 3 goals in the final 1-13. So when they were flowing, you were seeing those quick runs in 1-2 goals to get themselves back in it. And that's why I think that Buffalo was able to negate any runs that Toronto was going on. Buffalo wasn't really able to go on any runs themselves, but they were coming up with those big-time goals in quick succession that kind of stifled the Toronto offense to make it so they couldn't just pull away in the lead. And, as we can kind of transition to the defense, one of the big ways that the defense was able to keep the offense in it was late in the second, after the fight between Belter and Gash. After Johnny T got the extra penalty and they went on the 5-on-3 penalty kill, that was such a critical kill off that Toronto was up by 1 at that point. They could have, scored 2, gone up by 3 on the power play back to back there, and they were able to stifle that between what the defense was able to do, getting those block shots. Vince came up pretty big on a couple of those saves, but also the offense being able to kill some time on there. I believe there was a second opportunity where McKay had it pinned against the boards, and then they called something. I don't know what they called, but they called
like
it so
pushing, I believe.
It was something. He had 3 guys draped on him, but that's what we were talking about, where finding those opportunities to kill more of the penalty kill clock, and they've been great at it all season, and they were great in it there to stifle Toronto's offense and not let them pull ahead any more than they already were 10-9 going into the fourth quarter.
Yeah, as far as the defense goes, I didn't love the defense in this game all that much.
First half was bad.
What was that?
First half was horrible. They were playing way, way too soft.
Yeah, that's what I kept putting in my notes over and over and over for the goals was the defense was playing so far back. They weren't playing up. They weren't physical. I don't know what was going on. I don't know if they thought because Toronto had no offense, they really weren't going to have much of a problem. I think Jalen Rogers made a huge difference for this offense, and we'll get into that in a second. But they were just playing so soft. Like, the Toronto forwards had so much time and space to take those shots, to pick their corners, and that was the issue. Like, yeah, you can say Vince had an off game. He did. It was an off game for Vince, but the defense didn't really help them out early that much. They just were allowing Toronto to do whatever they wanted. They were giving them time and space, and you just can't do that. Like, I don't know. They were not playing as physical as they needed to. Shots were being uncontested, where the stick and the defense were just not anywhere near the guy shooting the ball, allowing him to just pick corners. I was really not happy with the defense in the first half. They just really didn't play well. And then the second half, which is what I'm going to bring up, I think Jalen Rogers had 6 points in the first half and 1 point in the second half. So the changes that they made, and this is a huge coaching thing, the changes that Johnny made in halftime, I think they even said on the broadcast that they knew that Jalen was getting to them too much. They were going to go into halftime, make some adjustments, come back out, and see how it goes. And they made adjustments, and Jalen Rogers finished with 1 point in the second half from his initial 6 points in the first half. That's an insane adjustment for one half, and a really, really big adjustment. When a guy hasn't played all year, and he's the captain of the team, and he's a great player, you don't know how that's going to affect the offense for Toronto, and it affected them in a huge way in the first half. And then the second half, they took out Jalen Rogers, and yes, Toronto still scored, but they didn't score nearly as many. And they really started to step up the defense, really started shutting them down. And even as the game went on, you saw more and more 30-second clock shot violations because they were playing more physical. They were getting in the way of things. They were really tying up Jalen Rogers, and everything was kind of feeding through him early. And once they tied him up, the offense kind of fell apart for Toronto after that. And were they at 5 in the second half, I think?
5 goals, yes. Yep.
And 2 of those at least were transition. One's Desnu, one's Martin. So The offense for Toronto scored 3 goals in the second half, and not sure, at least one of them's power play. So realistically, could have been 2 goals in the second half by Toronto's offense, even strength. I mean, the changes that the defense and Vince were able to make from the first half to the second half were huge. I hated them in the first half. Second half, they made adjustments, went in, and that is a huge, huge, huge thing for coaching. I think Johnny deserves a lot of credit for those second half changes and how this team completely flipped the script in the second half, and especially not allowing Toronto to score for the final 9 minutes of the game to allow them to get back in it and end up winning the game.
Yeah, between him and Dietrich, they did a phenomenal job of adjusting what their game plan was going
on
into
the
it
fly.
because the first half was not good. We can be completely honest. If you're hearing us, if this is the first time you're listening to the show, we're not one of those ones that are diehard. We're diehard fans, but we're not diehard blinded fans. We're going to call it out when it needs to be called out. Defense in the first half was not good. They were way too soft, like you mentioned. They were not playing hard on their defense. They were getting back down in front of the net. You know, for a team that had been averaging 9 block shots, in this one they had 5. And with the 7 power play opportunities that they awarded the team in Toronto, 5 block shots is not enough. This is not enough. 37 shots on net, that's perfect. But it's just the quality of shots that they were getting. I want to go back to games 1, 2, and 3 where I was complaining about the number of shots because the number of shots they were getting were, yeah, they were high, but they were quality shots that Vince wants to see. And this one, it just seemed like I noticed there was way too many times where, there was the lack, I don't know if it was lack of communication or lack of awareness, but the switch offs weren't good. The closeouts on the shooters weren't good. Paul Dawson a few times looked way too out of it. There was one time where he got deked out of his pants, fell back, and then just stood in front of the net and didn't know where who to cover. Like, there was way too many times in this situation and on this team, and maybe a lot of it has to do with, Weiss was in the box for as long as he was. There were many times where a lot of these players were in the box. The defense was in the box. Belter was in the box to early start the game. You had Wires in the box. You had like I mentioned, Weiss was in the box for nearly a full quarter. So I do think that did not help the first quarter, having one of your best defensive stallmates in the net, or I'm sorry, in the penalty box. But it's just it wasn't good enough, and that is where you do have to credit Johnny T and Steve Dietrich on the second half adjustments. The way they flipped the switch, and like you mentioned with Jalen Rogers, I had that in my note. He went 1, 5, and 6 in the first half, 1 assist in the second half, and the offense was running through Jalen Rogers. And once you were able to shut him down, the offense kind of disappeared. And credit to them, credit for the adjustments, credit to the players for adjusting on the fly like that, listening to the instructions on how to fix the defense, and Dalwick, 2, 1, and 3 on 7 shots. Small, 2, 2, and 4, 12 shots. Bushi, 3, 3, and 6 on 6 shots. Rogers only had 2 shots on net, but 1, 6, and 7. Like you mentioned, 1 assist in the second half. Craig, 1, 2, and 3 on 2 shots. Cameron, 2, 1, and 3 on 5 shots. So you didn't have anybody really blow up on you. It was kind of a mixture for everybody out there, but they were able to capitalize and shut down when they needed to. And credit to Steve Priolo. Those big loose balls that he was able to make off those saves, the first one to get the ball up to Nick Weiss, he was the one that got the loose ball with his back towards the goalie. I don't know how he was able to snag that out of the air. That was the loose ball that led to the Nick Weiss goal, and we'll talk about that in a second. But then the following one where they were able to force Corey Small into a bad shot that Vince made the save. Again, Steve Priolo was the one that picked up that loose ball. So getting those loose balls and coming up clutch when they needed to was monster. But we'll talk about the Nick Weiss goal that I'm an idiot, Phil, because I was the one up in the stands. As soon as Steve Priolo got that ball, I'm jumping up and down for them to call a timeout. And guess what? If they would have listened to me, probably wouldn't have scored, and they probably would have sent to overtime, and who knows what happens there. But credit to Johnny T, credit to Priolo to see they had the run in through transition, and credit to Nick Weiss for pulling the move and sneaking it through Halachuk's 5-hole. But Nick Weiss, another one of those ones that seems to come up with monster goals when he needs to. I think he was the one that scored in Colorado in Buffalo versus Colorado in the finals. That big transition goal from the same side. It was a monster, and credit to us. We're the ones that said Nick Weiss seems to have monster games versus Toronto, and he definitely did in this one. And that's why he was the BSC Game 4 MVP.
Yeah, and same thing with Fraser's goal.
Yeah.
even just the the coaching staff really trusting their players and not calling a timeout for either of those times. I mean, Fraser was down to, math is tough, is at what, 2:13 left in the game? Maybe
1:13.
1:13. That's what I thought. I thought it went a lot farther than that. So 1:13 left in the game, and you don't call a timeout. Like, the amount of trust you have in that situation to not call a timeout, not pull Matt Vince, not set up your offense, and just say, okay, we trust you guys, go out and get a goal. Like, up in the press box, we were kind of like, hey, you going to call a timeout? Like, what do you do? Like, set a play up. Like, why are you letting this roll? And then all of a sudden Fraser comes out and scores on that play. Like, oh, okay. I see why you didn't call a timeout. Makes sense. Sure. So, I mean, just the trust and faith that the coaching staff, which they should, don't get me wrong, the team has earned the faith of the coaching staff by far, but still in that situation to let your team go with the flow when they haven't scored and that was, if I'm reading this correct, that was the time that they were about 11 minutes in between goals. So, I mean, to still trust your team after not scoring for 11 minutes, to be like, all right, we trust you guys to go out there with a minute 13 left when this could, like, that could have been their last possession. There's a chance where Toronto gets the ball back, shoots it on net, gets another ball back that's, a full minute, and there's a good chance, not a good chance, but there's a chance you don't get the ball back the rest of the game after that possession, and to let your offense just go with the flow and trust them and let them score is just incredibly trustworthy of the coaching staff. And then, like you said, same thing with Nick Weiss. No timeout there. Just go out and get it. And it worked. The team paid off with it, and it worked. And as far as the defense, the other issue I had was same thing. It was just being soft, but this was by far the amount of most inside goals I had seen against Vince by a long shot so far this season. And I mean, again, not seeing Challen Rogers all year, and then all of a sudden seeing him, he absolutely sparked that offense to a different level in the first half. But the defense just playing so soft to allow the offense to get inside so many times on Vince is just not something we saw throughout the first games. But this was a huge test for the Bandits, and to see that they could fight back an insane amount of times. I mean, they had the lead for 5 minutes the entire game. That was it, and they ended up winning. And just to see them have the resilience in the fight to keep going back after 10 ties and 11 lead changes. Like, it was one of those games where they hadn't really been tested the first 3 games. This one was a huge test, and they were able to come out on top.
So before we get into the goalies, miscellaneous stuff, and wrap up this game, let's get into our first sponsor of the show, Tap That Tap Room.
So many notes. Tap Tap Room is at 363 Delaware Street in Tonawanda, New York. They are Buffalo's first women-owned self-pour bar featuring 30 consistently rotating taps offering a variety of beers, sours, seltzers, ciders, and malt beverages.
So for those of you who have not listened to the show, we're picking up new listeners all the time, especially now that the Bandit season's kicking off. That's our main subject, so everybody's going to be listening to us for that. Here is how a self-pour bar works, and it's very simple. You get there, you go to the counter, you let them know, they get your card, they give you a new card, and all you have to do is literally take that card, go up to the beer wall. It goes one wall, and then goes right around the corner, and there's 30, like Phil mentioned, 30 rotating taps for whatever you could possibly want. They have something for everyone. I'm still not getting credit for that. But all you have to do is just take your card. There's a little slot for it. You set it right there. You take your glass from the shelf, you go up to it, and then you just pour as little or as much as you want. My suggestion, don't do what I did the first time, is if you don't know what you like, go up there, try something out. Don't pour a full glass because you're just going to be charged for how much you pour out. If you pour a full glass and you don't like it, you're drinking something you don't like and you're getting charged for it. So try a little bit. If you love it, fill up your whole glass. But with the 30 rotating taps, the one I would personally go to, just because it's a funny name, Naked Lollipop Loganberry. It's a sour fruited from Froth Brewing. And what's also nice is when you go onto their website and see what there is, it's rated. So this one's a 3.9. But also on their website, not only is it letting you know what 30 drinks are on tap, it says what's on deck. And for me, what I'm looking forward to, because I was staying at their Airbnb this fall, Black Cider Hard Cherry from 1911 Brewery. It's delicious. If you've never tried it, wait for that to go on tap. Go there and drink that thing dry because it's absolutely delicious. But if you've never been to Tap That Tap Room, you have to make a stop there. It's easily accessible, and it's such a great environment. It's not one of those stuck up bars where you're afraid to go up to the counter because there's not even a counter. You just go there, fill up your own drink, and there is no wait whatsoever because you are your own bartender. So for what other events they got coming up, because they got a lot at the end of January, which come back Friday and listen to those. Check out their Facebook page for what's on tap, and check out tapthattaproom.com for what's on tap and what's on deck. Let's get into the goalie now. This was definitely Matt Vince's roughest game. And for me, the 13 goals, I counted 4 that I had against him. The first one, Cameron bodies Priolo and gets inside, but Vince seemed like he got beat short side. I think he would want that one back. The 7th goal, Small beats Vince. Priolo doesn't close the gap, but I think that one's on Vince. I think he wants that one back. The 9th one off the faceoff win, Farrell again lost it, but it ends up with Martin. I think it was Dylan Robinson. I don't think it was Buchanan. I'm pretty sure it was Dylan Robinson was draped all on him. And he was all on him all the way to the net. And Vince somehow lets that squeak through. I think he wants that one back. And then the 13th, the Mitch DeSnew one. That one, yes, Paul Dawson, or I believe it was Paul Dawson, doesn't close out on Mitch DeSnew for whatever reason. He gets picked. Mitch DeSnew gets into the middle of the net and beats Matt Vince. I think those are the 4 that he definitely wants back. But on top of that, he makes the big saves when needed, especially in crunch time. So I'm not faulting him for all 13 goals, but this was definitely a game where it was noticeable he was not making those big saves like we had seen in the first 3 games. Not holding that against him. Every goalie's going to have a weak game, but this one just seemed like there was at least 4 that I saw that he would definitely want back.
Yeah, and this is the kind of game that, going back to the offense and just a completely different style game. Right. This is the kind of game where your defense didn't do great, your goalie was a little bit off, yet you did enough to win the game. Right. Your offense was able to pick you up and win the game, and that's what great teams do, is they find a way to win. The first 3 games, they didn't need the defense to do as well as they did because the offense has been doing fine, but the defense did absolutely incredible, and half the time the game-winning goal was done by halftime and the game was over. And in this one, it was a lot of, defense was a little bit soft. Vince wasn't at his A game, but they did enough to win the game. And like you said, they came up with those big saves and big stops in the late fourth quarter, not allowing Toronto to score the last 9 minutes of the game. Like, you can have a bad game throughout the whole game, but if you shut a team down for 9 minutes to end the game and allow your offense in that moment to come back, that's what a championship team does. They clamp down at the right moments. They don't let all these bad goals kind of take away from their own mentality. They step up when they need to. And the offense was helping the defense out for a really long time. And then the defense, when the offense went on an 11-minute goal drought, the defense was able to hold the game in place for their offense to catch up and eventually win the game. So it was a really, really great team win on both sides where, defense and Vince didn't play great, offense played great, and then they kind of switched in the fourth quarter where the offense ran dry because the goalie switched and Howard Chuck played fantastic, but then the defense was able to clamp down on Toronto and give the offense time to get back in the game and eventually win. So just a really, really great team victory. Like you said, Vince, not his best game. We'd have to look, and that's probably a lot more research than we want to do, but I don't know the last time he played a full game and only had 24 saves. That's probably one of his worst save performances. And again, when there's only 37 shots, you can't really be credited for a bad amount of saves, but the 64 save percentage, also probably one of the worst of his career, especially coming off a 62-88 save percentage kind of game. Again, I don't think all this was on Vince by any means, but he needed to have a better game. Defense needed to have a better game, but everybody kind of worked together to escape with a win, and that is the best you can hope for.
Yeah, again, if this is the first time you're listening to the show, we're not one that's going to blame the goaltender for all 13 goals, and we're not ones that's going to say, hey, all 13 are not his fault. Yes, you're the greatest goaltender, possibly the greatest lacrosse player of all time, but even you can have rough games, and when that happens, you can get called out on it. But I think you summed it up perfectly. This was one of those games where it wasn't like the first 3 games, where literally everything was clicking. Your goaltender was playing unbelievable. The defense was not letting up anything, and the offense was flowing. This was a game where, hey, the offense was playing really well when the defense wasn't. The defense was playing really well when the offense wasn't, and Vince was making those big time timely saves in the second half, like we've known him to do his entire Buffalo Bandits career. He shut the Toronto Rock down, who had 13 goals down for the final 9 minutes. That's exactly what you need from a team like this, and you perfectly said it a few minutes ago. Great teams find ways to win when things are going against them, when they don't have their fastball. And they didn't have their fastball in this one, and they still got it done. That's what happens with great teams. They're able to put teams away and win in different ways. And I think you said it right before we went to the ad read. This was a big test for this team, and it's a good thing to see early on in the season, because games 1 through 3, it was like, okay, they're just going to run through this whole schedule. There's going to be no issues, which we already knew there was going to be issues and there was going to be tests, especially when you're playing this well and you're a 2-time defending champion. You're going to get everybody's best game all through the season. Getting tested this early was perfect. And I guess we can transition to the miscellaneous stuff, and this is kind of where we're going to be talking about some of the calls in the game. But to me, Farrell, I had issues with him in this game. And yes, he went 22 of 31, but to me, it's when you lost the faceoffs. He lost the 2 big-time faceoffs at the end of the game. Like, he did not come up clean with those balls. He came up clean and then lost it on the one that right before Farrell. I think it was the Weiss one, right before we scored in the transition. Farrell came up with a clean ball, but Cree, who is not a faceoff man, was able to knock that thing free. And the second thing is, him and the team need to figure out, and I don't know why it hasn't happened. I think this is like his 10th or 11th game. When he comes up clean with that ball, it's like he's never played lacrosse in his entire life. Like, I don't understand it. They said it on the broadcast multiple times. It's like he doesn't know what to do when the ball's in his stick. He either runs right to the corner, loses it. I don't know what happens, but they need to come up with some type of design. They did. I love the one play design. Farrell wins it clean, and for some reason, and I don't know who ran to the bench, but he was right at the bench, and Nanticoke came off really clean. And yes, he ended up losing it, but it sent Nanticoke. It was a perfectly great play design. It's just, we need more things that once Connor Farrell wins the faceoffs, because he does add stuff to the team. He's playing really, really well this season. It's just when he comes up clean with those balls, there is nobody in sight. And maybe it's not just on him. Maybe it's the players on the field that need to get in positions to give him an outlet pass. But there's just way too many times in the first 4 games and dating back to last year where he comes up with the clean faceoff, and it's a turnover. Like, you can win faceoffs and those numbers look really good, but when you're getting a caused turnover instantly, like, he loses the ball instantly, what does a faceoff win do? It's nothing. It just goes the other way. So they definitely need to work on what to do when he wins it clean, because I still don't know if they have an idea with that.
Yeah, I actually thought this was one of the more important games for Farrell, and I did write in my notes exactly what you said, lost the really big faceoff at the end of the game, but there were a lot of times that he won the ball and they scored immediately off of that face-off victory, and there were some, I don't know,
3 straight.
I would say there were 3 straight that he won and they scored. They won, scored, and those are huge. I mean,
Yes.
That is exactly what you're looking for. Like, you and I often say face-offs don't matter, or until they do, and we often say, like, how many times does a face-off victory really lead to a goal? And there were 3 straight in a row, and I was like, all right, this is where Farrell really matters. And even the amount of times that a power play, either for or against, power play or penalty kill, was going either off of a goal and a power play was continued, or there was a quarter break, a half break, and the power play was continued, and you wanted to win that either to get your team on the power play or to get your team on the penalty kill and kill an extra 30 seconds. I thought he did a good job. There were just a lot of what we would call important face-offs in this game, where it was either a special teams face-off where if you win it, you get to either kill or add 30 seconds to the clock, or it was a face-off that led directly to a goal, 3 in a row. That was just monstrous in the game. So I thought for face-offs that mattered, this was one of his better games as far as that goes. But like you said, in the really crunch time, you could tell he got really upset that he lost that one. He looked like he had kind of a plan that had worked multiple times throughout the game, where he won it to the corner and then kind of like swiped it back with his stick, but he missed, and then that caused Toronto to get the ball, call the timeout, and those are the exact face-offs you and I always mention. Like, this is a really important face-off. This is why you have a face-off guy. You need to win this. and he didn't win it. And obviously, you could tell he was upset with himself because he knows that's why he's out there. But I did think there were a lot of situations in this game where Farrell did win it, and they were important face-offs to win at that time. So a little bit of a mixed bag for him, but I thought he did do really well. And in general, I know he hasn't really faced anyone good yet so far this season, but he is winning a lot of face-offs against, I would say, lesser talent at this point. So we'll see what happens when he goes up against somebody who's actually good at face-offs. But so far, he is winning face-offs that he should win, other than the couple. But he's winning against players he should win the face-offs against. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I agree. And for all of you that might be harping on, why are you talking so much about a face-off man? If you're going to roster a face-off man, we're going to critique it. I mean, we always say face-offs don't matter until they actually do. And each face-off has a different value, I would say. Some of them are ranked like 1. Like, it's not that big of a face-off. Some of them are 10. And to me, those two ones that at the end of the game where he needed to come up with them and he did not come up with them, those are 10s, and you definitely need to come up with those ones. So it's a learning experience, but I have liked Farrell a lot this season. I think he has added something to the team. It's just we need to figure out what to do when he wins a clean face-off, because it's just too many times where, as cool as it was seeing him take on 3 guys and bullnose ahead, which was on the penalty kill, there's other times where he just runs down to the corner and gets pinned against the board and it's a turnover. And what good is a face-off win if you're not able to do anything with it? But we'll go into the officiating, and I typically don't pay much attention or care much about what the refs do because they have a tough job. My thing has always been the entire time of the show, either be consistently good or consistently bad for the both teams. It seemed like this ref group lost control of the game early on. They were trying to fight to get it back, but in the wrong ways. There were calls that went against Buffalo that I fully agree with. Belter and Wires, this is exactly what we were saying. Second man in, they always catch the second guy. Yes, I think they were kind of weaker calls, but letter to the law, that's a penalty. I didn't like the Weiss playing without a helmet, but that it was the right call. I think if he would have passed it one step shorter, I think they would have allowed it, but it was the right call. Frazier with the pick. It was a clean as day pick, but they're trying to get rid of that of the game. I understand that one. But it's the missed calls and the calls that went against Buffalo that I didn't understand with it. That's the inconsistency of this ref group. It was the missed call on Weiss getting blown up outside of the door. Should he have been aware that Cree was coming out of the box? 100%. But if you're trying to take those kind of hits away, that needs to be called. It's a 2-minute call. I'm not even worried about the 5. That should have been a 2-minute call. The one with Frazier getting blindsided and then Belter goes to defend him. That is a dangerous, defenseless player. Yes, the ball's in his stick, but what is it like? You can't tell me. I understand that there's a difference between the ball's in your stick and when the ball's not in your stick. But what was the difference between when Chase Frazier laid the hit that Weir didn't know was coming, and Frazier getting hit by Gash and he doesn't know it's coming? Like, if you're trying to get rid of that game, you have to call it each time, regardless if the ball's in his stick or not. If you don't know the hit's coming, how do you not call that? The kicking of the ball. Rodgers had the ball. It was 30 seconds over. He kicked it to the corner. How many times this year and last year have we seen that gets called? That was not called. I thought the refs lost control early. They were inconsistent trying to get it back, and the calls that they were making were so inconsistent. You were calling them sometimes, and you weren't calling it the other times. And that's when it was. If you're going to constantly call it the same all game so the players know how to play. If you're not doing it, this is the type of game that you're going to get. That's my biggest harp. It wasn't against... the refs aren't targeting Buffalo. It's not a thing. Everybody wants to make it a thing. It's not a thing. It's just... sometimes the refs have really good games. Sometimes they have really bad games. I thought this was a really bad ref game from both sides. The Buchanan, he was in the crease. I think we can all agree on Josh Burns' goal. He was in the crease. Close, that went Buffalo's way. So you can't just say that nothing went Buffalo's way. That his foot was in the crease. But again, that's why you wear white shoes. But to me, it was just the inconsistencies of the refs were my main issue. Not what they were calling, but that they were calling it sometimes and not other times. I haven't had an issue with the refs the first 3 games of the year. This it's because the games were all blowouts, but I haven't really had to get on the refs at all most of the season and pretty much my entire time doing this show. This one was probably one of the worst ref games I have seen in my 4 years of covering this team.
Yeah, when I was going through it for the article, I had pretty much all the calls against the Bandits, like you said, were good calls. I didn't like the helmet one, but like you said, if you're playing it to a T, it is correct. I think they easily could have let it go. The ref who was right next to the scrum didn't make the call, who's watching Weiss run away with the ball. Looks like he's about to pass. So, yes, was it a penalty? Sure, if you want to be extremely strict. Could they have let it go and nobody would have cared? Absolutely. He was literally mid-pass when you blew it on him. So, yes, it is technically a penalty if you don't have your helmet, which is in the article. I have, I think, 8 different rules that are in my article that are at the bottom of it to go over and read for everybody, because there was a lot of questionable calls and calls that even I looked up that I was confused about. So this was one of them. The second you lose your helmet, if you have the ball, you're supposed to shoot or pass or drop it. Like, literally, it's supposed to be instant. I think you're allowed pretty much one step. And he picked up the ball, ran away from the scrum, and then made the pass. So was it correct? Yes. Could they have let it go and nobody would have cared? Yes. Same with the illegal substitution. I watched this like 10 times.
I couldn't figure it out.
I did. So, again, really ticky-tacky and annoying. But there was, when I watched it so many times to figure out what they were talking about, there's a Bandits player, and so again, this is the correct call if you're going to be a bit of a jerk and really, really harp on this, but there was a Bandits player who was not part of the play. He was in the doorway and had one foot on the turf and then picked it up and was going back into the bench. So when there was 5 guys on the field and nobody was in that transition substitution area that he should have been switching with. So technically, yes, he was the 6th man. His one foot touched the floor, and that is what they called. So if you want to be to the letter of the law, yes, it was too many men. If you want to be a jerk about it because he immediately picked his foot up, went back to the bench,
play,
and
it's the exact same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And he leaned back in the bench. He had no it wasn't part of the play. That's what annoys me so much about too many men, is that so many times, they harp on the substitution area, that little orange box in front of the bench, to make sure everybody's switching properly. But when it's away from the play, they don't seem to care. You got 5 extra steps, 1 door, the other guy's already gone halfway, and technically all of those are too many men, but they don't seem to care about that. In this situation, that player did nothing to affect the play whatsoever. His one foot touching the turf had nothing to do with the play, and that's what annoys me about it. You had to be pretty much looking for that penalty as a ref in order to call that penalty. He must have been just staring at the bench, waiting for that player to put his foot down. That made no impact on the play whatsoever, and that's what annoys me about that call. Again, if you want to be extremely strict, it is correct, but it had nothing to do with the goal. It had nothing to do with the play, and the player immediately picked his foot up. Yes, he shouldn't have done that, but immediately picked his foot up and went back to the bench and just pretty much leaned backwards, and that's all he had to do. And it just had nothing to do with the play. So back to all of this. Yes, I do agree. Every call on the Bandits, as ridiculous as I think some of them were the correct calls. But like you said, they weren't being equally called against Toronto. There was one play that I noticed, which is something you notice more from the press box than you do while watching the game. It was McKay's first goal. If you go back and watch it, he gets in a bit of a scrum with whoever's defending him. He rips his helmet and then punches him in the face, and the refs did not see it. And it just carried on, and then McKay very shortly after gets a pass and scores. And I was like, all right, well, that wasn't called. He got away with that one because it was pretty bad. He straight up just punched the guy in the face, and the refs didn't do anything. So, I mean, yes, there's times where it went for the Bandits, but a lot of other times, especially with what you said, was the blindside hits, which is what Johnny ended up getting his technical bench minor, was for him asking what is a blindside hit to the refs, and the refs just refused to answer him and could not explain what they were finding as a blindside hit, and he just wanted an explanation because his players are being called on it and Toronto's players were not. So he wanted an explanation. What is this call? And they wouldn't give it to him. He ended up with the bench minor, and that was the 5-on-3. And that is, I do agree, the inconsistency of the refs was really rough in this game. Just call it one way and not the other. And that is the issue I had with them. The calls they made against the Bandits, again, were fine, but other than that, they just weren't consistent on both sides. Not going over every single rule that I have because there's a lot that I put down. But two calls that I thought were interesting. One, somebody mentioned on Facebook, withholding. I had not heard the technical term for it. These were also very ticky-tacky, which was annoying as well. Never called on Toronto, but what withholding is when a player is holding the ball to his body or somehow where the other players can't get it, it's trapped against you. The one where Farrell was running through the three players and they called it before he got the shot off. I thought that was a terrible call. You could see his stick was out away from his body, just being bullied by three players. I thought that was a terrible withholding call before he got the shot off. And then another one, I think it was Dylan Robinson, was pinned up against the boards. Technically, yes, but he's being pinned up against the boards by the defenders. I don't know what you want him to do in that situation, but yes, he had it up against his body and the glass. So technically that was a correct withholding, but they called it a lot in this game, only against the Bandits. That was a weird one. And then the other one, which I don't know, we might talk about it off the podcast because it's a lot to get into, but the one where Bushi scored the goal from behind the net. He hits Vince in the face with his stick before the ball goes in. And the way I read the rule is if you make contact with the goalie, especially to interfere his ability to make a save, that's supposed to be called a crease violation. I was surprised that they let that goal go because Vince clearly gets hit in the head with his stick before the ball goes in. And the way I read the rule, which might be wrong, seemed like that should have been called back on goaltender interference. I don't know how you hit a guy in the face before the ball goes in and let it go. But overall, very inconsistent and a lot of rules I had to look up in order to really understand what the refs were calling in this one.
Yeah, this game had a mixed bag of literally everything. We could probably talk another hour on just this game, but we're almost at the hour mark now, so we'll power through. Only one milestone was accomplished in this one because Chris Cloutier did not play. He had 2 of the 4, but Paul Dawson did tie Sean Evans for 7th, which is actually 8th now because Mike Poulin did play with 270 games, so congratulations to him. Not much to talk about on that one, but we'll look at the NLL outlook for this week. Ottawa beat Georgia 14-10. Nailed that one. I went 6-1 on the week. Me and producer Pat, and then Phil went 5-2. This was one that we disagreed about, but Ottawa led 6-5 at halftime, 11-8 after 3. Only 5 power play opportunities in this one. Dunbar continues to light it up. Teat had a really good game, and then Sundown actually came out to play in this one. Georgia, besides Lyle, we've been saying it for years now. They do not have enough offense to be a legit threat in this game. They can win some games, but in crunch time, you do not have enough offense. San Diego versus Vancouver. Vancouver wins this one 11-9. San Diego actually led 6-3 entering the fourth quarter, and then Keegan Ball went nuts, scoring a sock trick in the fourth quarter. Charlotte Beatty's finally got going. Grant had another 2 goals, and Ball, 6, 1, and 7. Aiden Walsh continues to be the untold story of the season. He's playing unbelievable, keeping Christian Del Bianco at bay. San Diego, Berg had 4, 1, and 5, but their offense once again goes quiet in an irregularity. Really good game, 46 of 56 saves. Afternoon game, Philly won 13-11. Calgary actually led 9-8 after 3, and 10-9 with 6:29 left, and then Philly would score 4 straight in the final 2:24. Jones had 5. Katoni went 1, 5, and 6. Rezateris 2, 5, and 7. Damoud once again. Really, really good game. 4 straight games for him where he's played unbelievable, 46 of 57 saves. Calgary had no Dobie. Dixon stepped up. King and Pace continued to dish out the assists but not score. And then McLeod, really good game, 43 of 55, but did not have enough offense and did not come up with those timely saves that is needed in the victories. The big-time goal scoring, it was the highest scoring game in NL this season. 19-8, Halifax takes down Rochester. Tied 9.5, tied 13 after 3. Halifax would score the 4 of 5 to start the fourth quarter. 4 straight by Rochester, and then Clark Peterson scored with 0.1 seconds left in the game to win it. Hogarth 4, 5, and 9. Stotts 4, 6, and 10. Jameson in his return 2, 3, and 5. The offense was just, everybody had stats in this one. Rochester, Fields 3, 4, and 7. Convey 4-5-9. Just unbelievable stats, and the goaltenders really didn't come out to play very much. Hutchinson, that was the biggest note, though. Hutchinson did play instead of Hill, making 42 of 60 saves. A couple more here. Las Vegas falls to Saskatchewan 15-9. It was 10-4 at half. Never really close. Saskatchewan gets Robert Church and Austin Shanks back. Ryan Keenan finally must have read my articles. He finally came out to play 4-2-6. Las Vegas just not enough offense, and Kells gets pulled with just 12 minutes into the game. Getty came in and played really well. That'll be something to monitor next week if Getty gets the start. And then the final one of the weekend, Colorado comes back and defeats Albany 15-13. Albany actually led 4-1 after one and 8-1 early in the second, and then Colorado mounted a comeback to win it. Albany actually led 13-10 in the third, and then a 5-0 run in the fourth by Colorado. But once again, the offense of Colorado is playing really well, and Albany falls to 1-5. Phil, real quick, what's your look on all 14 teams playing this week? A lot of things were answered, and a lot of more questions were proposed.
Yeah, I think that is my biggest takeaway. We're running long here, so I don't want to dive too deep. I think the biggest takeaway is still I have no idea what the entire NLL looks like. Who are the good teams? Who are the bad teams? I have no idea. All these teams are kind of randomly stepping up all over, and other teams are randomly falling. The teams like, again, Toronto and Albany struggling like crazy to start the season. Other teams that we thought would be terrible are starting to step up and do well. Rochester, again, who are you? I don't know. You come off a big win against, Georgia, I believe, in a monster victory against one of the best teams in the league. And then you lose to Halifax right after that. And I get it, 0.1, whatever. You lost a game you should have won when you're trying to get your season back on track. Calgary and Philly both at the top of the league somehow and looking okay. I mean, I don't know. It's all over the place. Even Georgia at this point, like, are they good? I don't know. They started really well, and now they've done what they were doing all year, and they can't score, but now other teams are scoring against them, which is their only strength. And even Ottawa, they've been a mixed bag so far, winning some really good games, losing some really good games. So far, I mean, we're far enough into the season where I feel like we should have a better idea of what's going on in the NLL, and I have no idea what's going on in the NLL other than the fact that the Bandits are really good. Outside of that, I have no idea. I mean, as far as playoffs go, any single team right now still, in my opinion, could rise, go on a massive run, and make the playoffs, including Albany, including Toronto. Tough, sure, but possible, yes. I don't know. I just that's the biggest takeaway again of this week, and even looking into next week. I mean, you already shared your picks with us. I got to go through my picks, and immediately looking at all the matchups, I was like, it's another week where I have no idea who's going to win. I have no clue. The entire week could be all over the place, and I feel like that's what it's going to be. I mean, it was just such a mixed bag this week, and I feel like it is like nobody's really separated themselves from the bottom or the top except the Bandits, who are now 4-0. Looking really good, even, again, winning a game that's finally been tough for them. They proved that they can win a close game, which is big for the Bandits. Outside of Buffalo, the entire league is just all over the place, and that's what I learned.
Yeah, well, I'll be able to talk a little bit more about that in my power rankings. I talk about the top 8 teams, and it's been tough this year to rank those teams because it's just it changes week to week so much. Besides Buffalo, Philly might be the number 2 ranked team once I go through this, sitting at 4-1. But
and those two teams play each other.
It's so tough to find who is that second ranked team because it changes week to week. But on our next show, we'll break that game down: Buffalo versus Philly on Friday. I will be up in the box for that one. Phil will be back in the crowd of Banditland. We'll move on. We'll knock these 2 segments out pretty quick. Bills moving on to the divisional round. I was right. Big time blowout, even though it didn't happen until the second half. 31-7. Allen showed why he is a true MVP, especially in the second half. 20 of 26, 272 and 2 plus 8 and 46 rushing. Cook was a monster in the first half, just unbelievable. Yeah. 23 for 120 and 1. I believe he was the first Bill since Thurman Thomas in 1995 to rush for over 100 yards in a Bills playoff game. Johnson, I don't know how he was able to stay in bounds on that 4th and 1. Why he didn't call a quarterback sneak, I have no idea, but that's why Allen is Allen. And Ty Johnson needs to re-sign this offseason. He needs, to me, he's going to be cheaper think James Cook is going to be, but that tandem right now is electric for the Buffalo Bills. I think this is the Curtis Samuel game that we're going to remember, the monster game that kind of pushed it over the limit and made it so Buffalo was just, unstoppable. But, the offensive line was unbelievable in this one. The defense in the first half, besides that one big play, I thought the defensive line was decent by the end of the game, but the first half they definitely struggled. The cornerbacks definitely struggled in the first half, but the second half they made the adjustments that we've been known to see with the Buffalo Bills since the second half. There's definitely a second half defense. They made the adjustments, but scoring 31 points against a tough Denver defense, really the only slip up I saw was that punt, that fake punt that I don't know how Matt Smiley still has a job for the Buffalo Bills. I've been calling for his head, not daily and not on every podcast, barely at all, but I don't understand how after 13 seconds, how after last year versus the Denver game where they only had 10 men on the field, like how many more slip-ups can this guy have? How many lifelines? What does he have on Sean McDermott to keep his job? But really, that was the only blooper. I think this offense proved what they're capable of doing. I think the defense proved that they're capable of making the adjustments at halftime like we've seen all season, and we're getting the wish that everybody in the NFL has wanted. Jackson versus Allen, Ravens versus Bills. Next week, we don't have a time yet, but that's going to be an electric type of game.
Yeah, I think the other scary negative, and it was toward the end of the game, so you were guarding a lot more of the deep pass because that's what Denver had to do, but Bo Nix starting to run around a little bit was a bit concerning when you have Lamar coming into town next week. It was something that you were worried about.
Back a lot sooner than they probably should have. They should have kept their nose to the ground.
Right. And again, I think it was more game script dependent. I mean, Nix didn't really run too much till the second half when they were playing deep coverage, watching everything back and just kind of let him all right, take your 15 yards. We don't really care, but something to just keep an eye on, which you mentioned as well with Lamar, especially coming into town. But overall, it looked like a good game. I mean, do you think at all there was some rust from this team not playing against New England and not really having too much of an intense game for the last 3 weeks of the regular season, where it really took until that fourth down Ty Johnson touchdown for the offense to really, really get clicking? Like, they were moving the ball extremely well, then they got stuffed in the red zone, so they should have had more points, but I think do you think there was any rust or just a little bit? I mean, even the broadcast was saying some of the passes Allen was looking at, just a little bit of nerves and a little bit of jumpiness, where he really settled down after that touchdown in the fourth and just played like we know Allen can play. It seemed like the first half and most of the third, he was gripping the ball a little tight, making a few throws that normally Josh Allen would have in the bag that he was missing, and just playing a little bit off until that fourth quarter where they really just ran away and looked pretty much flawless.
Yeah, real quick, I agree. It looked like Allen for sure. Cook looked completely fresh, but it definitely looked like Josh Allen was a little bit rusty. It seemed like one of those games, and I still go back to what he said in the past multiple times, is I need to be hit to be able to feel like I'm into the game. It felt like after sitting out all but the first snap of last week's game, it seemed like he needed to get hit early in the game to kind of jostle him and get him going. But yeah, definitely the second half he turned it on. It just seemed like it was one of those games where they weren't sleepwalking through it, but the first half he was not as crisp. That play where he missed, I think it was Kincaid or Knox right in the end zone on that first drive where they had to settle for a field goal. I remember he launched one over Coleman's head on a perfect ran route by Coleman. It just seemed like he was not fully crisp. I think if he was able to do a bootleg or run around and kind of just muscle through a guy and kind of get himself pumped up, I think he would have seen better stats in the first half. But I definitely think him not playing, which was the smart move, I'm not saying it wasn't the smart move, him not playing last week versus the Patriots kind of opened the game the way they did. They didn't really need much. One big broken play was kind of all Denver really had, but it's I think you're going to see a different offense to start next week versus the Ravens, and they better, because the Ravens are stinking good.
Yeah, last little fun stat that I saw ESPN threw out there, Denver had just 53 combined scrimmage yards from running backs and tight ends. It's the fewest in a playoff game since 2007. So what we weren't worried about was Denver's running game, and my goodness, was it horrendous. And, they have really no tight end either. So the Bills defense did what they needed to do and played, honestly, really well. And even Von Miller was another one yes, he's playing against his old team, but he looked fresh. He looked good. He was pressuring the quarterback. So he's a player that we also talked about before the playoffs started, that he's going to be that critical rotational piece that needs to be bringing the pressure, and it looked like he did a good job in this game.
So this segment will be very quick. We'll talk about what we did for round 1 of the playoffs on our Friday show. But Sabres went 1-1 Thursday, 4-0. Quinn had 2. Cousins, McLeod scored. UPL 35-35. Shots 35-21 in favor of Buffalo. 0-4 on the power play. They were 5-2-1 in their last 8. And then flash forward to Saturday. Tara Bagula's in attendance because the Bills had a home game. Lost 6-2. They started off 2-0. Lafferty and Quinn scored. Then UPL 24 of 29 saves. Shots were 35-30 in favor of the Sabres. 1-for-5 on the power play. And then they let 6 straight in, 3 goals in 2 minutes and 18 seconds. And the little crowd that was left there at the game with Pegula in attendance, don't even know if he was still there, all chanting, "Sell the team." Yeah, it's the same old Sabres. Yes, they might be 5-3-1 in their last 9, but my God, Phil, like what we
Also,
credited them
that's not
early
good.
in the season with stopping the losses and all that kind of, it's the same team. It's like there's nothing else to put on repeat. There's nothing added to the bingo board. Originally I was like, oh man, Pegula's in attendance. What does this mean for the team? Is there going to be some changes? And I was like, oh, it was a home game and Bills played on Sunday. That's why he was in attendance and joyed us with his presence. This team makes me want to throw up.
Yeah, especially with the Bandits,
Yeah.
just cooking at
Was he
home
in
games.
attendance Friday for the Bandits?
No, he
No.
doesn't. I think he still thinks it's the Bisons and they don't play yet, so I think he's confused at who he owns. But yeah,
Why wouldn't you go to the Bandits game when you're in over the
I know,
Sabres?
right?
Like, come on, just even if you don't have to announce you're there, who cares?
Right,
Like,
right. You
show
can
your face.
hide that you're there.
Yeah.
But I mean, enjoy a ridiculously raucous Bandits versus Toronto epic
maybe somebody's got to
rivalry.
show him this game
back
and
and
turn him
forth.
into a lacrosse fan. Maybe that's what's also needed. Maybe that's
Should have.
Yeah. Still time.
But yeah, I mean, 5-3-1 isn't good enough when you had a 13-game losing streak. You have to really go, 7-3 pretty much every 10 games. I mean, going almost 500 in 10 games every time, not going to get it done. Not going to get you to playoffs. You have to start going over 500 every 10-game stretch you have, and the Sabres can't seem to do anything good. I mean, congrats on UPL for the shutout. Congrats on beating a team in your division in Ottawa, but then you turned around and did awful the next game.
Yeah, especially against the Seattle Kraken team that's not very good, but
Hey,
Sabres
hey,
not very good.
hey, you watch it.
They're 4 points back of Philly, who's right ahead of them, but they're in the bottom of the Eastern Conference. They're 9 points behind the Columbus Blue Jackets, who are in the final wildcard spot. Their season's done. It's toast. Yippee, another season of having to deal with this. But Phil, long episode. We kind of knew it was going to be with type of
There's a lot to talk
lacrosse
about
game.
the Bandits.
But
My
is there
goodness.
anything else you want to add to this episode before we shut it down and get ready for Buffalo versus Philly on Saturday?
Nope. Shut her down. Get out of here.
Perfect. So we will break down that game. Philly's coming in very hot. They're 4-1. We're going to have to break down that game in full detail on the Friday show. We got Bills versus Ravens. We'll talk about that one. And Sabres somehow still have a game, and they still have I think they got 39 games to go.
Not even at the All-Star break.
Let's go for a lockout, guys. Cancel the season. End it. So we'll end it there. Thank you all for listening to another episode of the Buffalo Sports Collective. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok while it still exists, on Buffalo Sports Collective, and on X and Blue Sky at Buffalo Sports Co. Visit our website at buffalosportscollective.com. Phil's article is coming out on Thursday. His is coming out on Tuesday. Mine's Thursday. Check out our store on our Linktree and our socials, or at the shop tab atop the website. Follow our channel wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you leave us a review on Apple and Spotify. Until next time. Bye-bye.